Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. In the city of New Mexico in 1882, the town's chief and his deputies were riding horses. Soon, the chief confronted a man named Randall, demanding that he hand over two of his men wanted for murder. But Randall refused to comply. When the marshal ordered his deputies to arrest the men, Randall responded without hesitation, drew his pistol, and killed the marshal and his men instantly. Away from this chaos, two old partners, Virgil Cole and Everett Hitch, were making their way across the western frontier. The duo worked as lawmen for hire, restoring order to towns that had fallen into disorder. Virgil, a skilled and brave fighter, had built a solid reputation thanks to his accuracy and calmness in dangerous situations. Everett, a former West Point graduate, had served in the army but left it in search of a life with greater meaning and fewer restrictions. The two men became close years ago, after Everett stood by Virgil during a deadly shootout and saved his life. Since that day, they remained together, traveling from one troubled town to another, offering their weapons and sense of justice to those most in need. We've kept the peace together for the past 12 years or so. Their next job was to bring Virgil Cole and Everett Hitch to the small town of Appaloosa. When they arrived, they met the town leaders, who explained that their town had fallen under the control of a powerful cattleman named Randall Bragg. Randall and his men had taken over the area, terrorized the townspeople, and did as they pleased without fear of punishment. Bragg and his men have made us all run scared. The leaders told them that the town's chief and his deputies had once tried to arrest two of Randall's cowboys for murder, but Randall himself intervened and killed the three lawmen. Since then, no one in the town dared to stand up to him. We want our town back, and we're ready to pay you. The town leaders pleaded with Virgil and Everett to take on the task and restore law and order. Virgil agreed, but with one condition. The leaders had to accept the laws he set and follow his authority without question. The leaders hesitated, arguing that this meant giving up control of the town. It means you'll be running the town. That's right, we can't accept that. While they were still debating, a woman named Tilda entered and reported an attack by Randall's men on the saloon. As the situation worsened, the town leaders had no other choice and finally agreed to Virgil's terms, signing his written agreement. Follow that damn Abner, so these men can do what they came here for. Virgil and Everett immediately headed to the saloon, where they found Randall's men drunk and causing chaos. The two lawmen confronted them, warning them to stop or face jail. The outlaws refused, saying they didn't recognize Virgil as the new town marshal. Virgil gave them one last warning that he would shoot if they tried to reach for their weapons. When they ignored him, both Virgil and Everett drew their guns and shot them dead on the spot. "Give me a pistol." The next day, Randall Bragg arrived in town with his entire gang. One of the town leaders saw them coming and rushed to warn Virgil and Everett in the saloon. Soon after, Randall and his men entered and introduced themselves. Virgil told him directly that he was now the town marshal, and that he believed Randall was involved in the murder of the previous marshal. Randall tried to dodge the issue, but Virgil refused to negotiate, saying that his men would either follow the new laws or end up jailed or dead. The meeting ended in silence, and before leaving, Virgil made it clear that from that moment on, no man was allowed to carry a weapon within the town limits. To carry a weapon inside the town limits, so next time we have to disarm you, jail yourself. I woke up a little while later, a woman named Allison French arrived in Appaloosa. Everett was the first to notice her as she got off the train, carrying herself with quiet confidence. Out of curiosity, he followed her from a distance until she entered a cafe where Virgil was eating. Allison politely asked if they could recommend a clean and affordable hotel in town. Virgil told her she could stay at the same hotel where he and Everett were staying, assuring her it was comfortable and safe. He then asked Everett to help her settle in. "Everett here will escort you to the hotel and help you get settled." "My pleasure." When Everett returned later, he told Virgil that Allison had asked about him. This caught Virgil's attention immediately, and he began asking Everett what had transpired between them. Everett said she asked if Virgil was married, and he replied that he didn't know. Virgil was annoyed by the answer, but Everett calmly reminded him that Allison would likely ask him herself, so he'd better have his own answer ready. Everett also mentioned that she preferred to be called Allie. Virgil then admitted his interest in her. Both men found her attractive, but Everett, seeing Virgil's serious interest, quietly stepped aside and decided not to pursue her. "I'm only interesting. What do you think of the man on the hill?" Later, Virgil and Everett noticed several horsemen watching the town from a nearby hill. Sensing trouble, they decided to investigate. When they reached the hill, the atmosphere grew tense. The riders claimed that Virgil's authority didn't extend to that area and that they hadn't broken any law. Virgil stood firm, telling them that Appaloosa and its surroundings were now under his control. To make his point, he struck one of the horsemen in the face with his pistol, sending a warning that Bragg's influence no longer ruled the town. Mr. Bragg can comfort each other. Wanting to help Allie settle in, Virgil arranged for her to work at the local hotel, where she could play the piano in exchange for, that night, She gave a wonderful performance while Virgil and Everett sat nearby, quietly discussing Bragg and his men over drinks. When she finished playing, Allie joined them at their table and started a conversation. She asked Virgil about his work, noting that their job required them to kill for a living. Virgil corrected her, explaining that they were lawmen who only killed when necessary to enforce justice. After a while, she asked him if he had any women in his life. Virgil replied that he had a woman in the past, but not now. Well, I don't think that's worth discussing. Later, a man insulted the bartender in front of Allie, and Virgil responded without hesitation. He hit the man and kept hitting him until Everett intervened and pulled him away. Virgil left the saloon angrily. The next day, one of the town's dignitaries approached Everett, wondering about the reason for Virgil's roaming and fighting in the town. Everett calmly explained that Virgil always has his reasons and is not the type to regret his actions. He told the leader that if the town wanted to protect Virgil, they had to accept both his strengths and his flaws. Later, when Everett returned to his office, he saw Virgil and Allie kissing from the window in the distance. Some time passed. While having breakfast at the hotel, Virgil joined Everett in an unusually cheerful mood, hinting that his relationship with Allie had deepened. Moments later, Allie joined them at the table. She happily told Everett that she and Virgil were planning to buy a house in town to live together. Everett was surprised by the news, but politely congratulated them. Their breakfast was interrupted by the arrival of a young man named Joe Whitfield, saying he had witnessed Randall Bragg killing the sheriff and his deputies. Virgil and Everett questioned him carefully, making sure he was prepared to testify against Bragg in court. Once they were certain, they got ready to arrest Bragg. They rode out to Bragg's ranch and found him outside, occupied, knowledgeable. Virgil and Everett held him at gunpoint and arrested him. One of Bragg's men saw this and fired into the air to alert the others. When the rest of Bragg's men arrived, they found Virgil and Everett already threatening their leader. Bragg ordered his men to lower their weapons and let the lawmen take him. As they escorted him through town, Bragg's men watched the situation but did not intervene, obeying his order. When Bragg saw Joe waiting for them and realized he was the one who betrayed him, he glared at him and swore he would kill him, leaving Joe terrified. Virgil reassured Joe that he would protect him as long as he agreed to testify. While Bragg remained in custody, Virgil spent his days building the house he promised Allie. However, she began to complain that he was dedicating too much time to his duties as police chief and not giving her or the house enough attention. Virgil felt frustrated, so he sent Everett to check on her, calm her down a little. When Everett arrived, Allie welcomed him warmly and gave him a tour. As they talked, she began to flirt with him, expressing her displeasure with Virgil's lack of attention. She asked him if he thought she was beautiful. When he agreed, she suddenly kissed him. Everett briefly responded before pulling away, reminding her that she was with Virgil, not him. She replied that Virgil wasn't there, but Everett firmly told her they were on Virgil's side and what she was doing was wrong. Allie felt embarrassed and hurt by his rejection, so she asked him to leave the house. As Everett was leaving, he noticed several of Bragg's men heading toward the mayor's office. He realized something was about to happen, so he hurried there and joined Virgil. One of the men stood beside him resolutely, announcing they had come to take Bragg. Virgil ordered Everett to go inside and threaten Bragg at gunpoint, warning him to be ready in case he was shot at. Facing the men outside, Virgil stood his ground and told them he was not afraid to die. He warned them that if they chose to fight, many of them would die before the day was over. His calm confidence and steady aim were enough to make them reconsider. After a tense silence, the men obeyed his order and left. There will be another moment. Allie, who had been watching everything from afar, ran over as soon as the men left. She entered the office with Virgil and Everett, looking disturbed but relieved that the danger had passed. Everett kept what had happened earlier with Allie to himself, afraid of causing trouble, but later he turned to a local explaining the situation to her. She warned him that Allie would twist the story one day and turn Virgil against him. What if she tells him and says you did it? Soon after, two lawmen arrived in Appaloosa with a judge. They offered help guarding Bragg until the trial began, and Virgil accepted their help. With Joe Whitfield ready to testify as a witness, everything seemed set. Shortly after, two notorious hired gunmen arrived in town, the Shelton brothers. They were dangerous men who would take any job, legal or criminal. Virgil recognized them immediately, but kept his composure. He made it clear to them that he was the law in Appaloosa and would not tolerate any trouble. The brothers, aware of his reputation, kept their distance and watched quietly. When things began to settle down, Virgil took Allie for a quiet trip outside town for a small picnic. When the day of Bragg's trial arrived, Joe Whitfield gave a detailed account of what he saw, describing how Bragg killed the sheriff and his deputies. Bragg grew angry and tried to defend himself while his men testified in his favor, claiming they knew nothing about what Joe said. Then the judge calmly advised Joe to get on his horse and leave town while he still could. Joe realized the danger and did not hesitate. He left immediately. They let Mr. Cole take over their town. When Bragg took the stand, he accused Virgil of cheating him and claimed Joe was lying to make him look guilty. Despite his confident manner and smooth words, the judge was not convinced. In the end, Bragg was convicted and sentenced to death in another town. While Bragg was being transported by train, Things went smoothly at first. The guards watched him closely, and Virgil seemed confident nothing would go wrong. However, when the train stopped to refill the water tank, trouble occurred. The Shelton brothers suddenly appeared under the tracks, holding Allie hostage, demanding Bragg's release and threatening to kill her if Virgil refused. "Come here or she'll be killed. He's got you in his sights." Faced with an impossible choice, Virgil hesitated, torn between his duty as a lawman and his feelings for Allie. In the end, he gave in and ordered Bragg's release to save her life. The brothers promised they would release Allie once the train started moving again. But as soon as they had Bragg, they left with him and Allie, leaving Virgil standing helpless and angry. Humiliated but determined to make things right, he set off after them on foot, while Everett stayed behind to return to town by train and bring horses. After a long and exhausting day, the lawmen reunited and began tracking the fugitives across the rugged terrain. Everett asked Virgil how he was. Virgil tried to hold himself together, simply replying that he was fine and reminded Everett that showing emotion was a good way to get himself killed. The next morning, they spotted the group camping near a river. At the same time, a group of native warriors began approaching the area, clearly preparing for an ambush. Virgil and Everett rushed closer, trying to reach Allie before violence broke out. To their surprise, they found her bathing naked in the river, laughing and playing with one of the Shelton brothers. The scene cut deeply into Virgil's pride, but there was no time to respond as the warriors approached. "What's going on?" Moments later, the attack began. When someone tried to drag Allie away, Virgil and Everett opened fire, killing one of the attacker's horses and forcing the rest to retreat. Seeing that everyone was still in danger, Virgil made a temporary truce with the Shelton brothers, agreeing to work together until they reached safety. The brothers accepted the agreement, and Virgil returned their weapons so they could fight if necessary. To avoid further conflict with the nearby warriors, Everett offered them Bragg's valuable horse as a peace gesture, which calmed the situation and allowed the group to move forward safely. That night, as they camped by the fire, one of the Shelton brothers told Virgil they were only helping Bragg because he owed them money and that it wasn't personal. Virgil warned them that Bragg was now his prisoner and that he would deal with him once they reached the city. "When we get to Rio, we'll settle things between us." Later, Allie sat between Virgil and Everett, trembling and emotional. She said she was terrified and that what happened with Ring Shelton was a mistake. She apologized, saying she was lonely and confused. Virgil listened quietly, then turned to Everett and asked if he thought Allie would betray him again. Everett answered honestly, saying she was the type who always needed someone to rely on. "Don't listen to him. He tried to put his hands on me." Allie grew angry at the comment and suddenly accused Everett of touching her. Virgil kept his calm and refused to believe her story, siding with Everett instead of her. Later, they arrived at a quiet little town where Virgil and the Shelton brothers prepared for their inevitable confrontation. Before the fight began, Virgil opened up to Everett, speaking quietly but firmly about his feelings for Allie. He admitted that despite everything, he truly enjoyed her company. He described her as full of warmth and charm, a woman who lights up any room she enters. Yet, with a heavy heart, he confessed she was not the type destined for a settled home or a quiet life. Everett listened attentively and reflected on Allie's nature. He told Virgil she wasn't truly immoral or cold-hearted, but simply drawn to power and authority. Her affections seemed to naturally shift toward whoever held power at the moment. Virgil admitted that none of this changed his feelings for her. He still loved her deeply and intended to stay by her side. Get over the matter of the ring. It may not be the last time. Shortly after, Allie appeared. She looked frightened and uncertain, her voice trembling as she asked how the two men could walk calmly toward death. Both Virgil and Everett tried to comfort her, explaining that danger had always been a part of their lives. Allie admitted that her greatest fear was losing everything she had. Virgil assured her that as long as she needed him, he would be there to protect her. "For how long?" "As long as you need." When the time came, Virgil and Everett made their way to the cattle barns. Upon arrival, they discovered a cruel betrayal. The town's sheriff, whom they had trusted to arrest Bragg, was actually a relative of the Shelton brothers. It was a trap. Bragg, the brothers, and the sheriff surrounded them, turning what was supposed to be a fair fight into a desperate ambush. 4 against 2. Gunfire shattered the silence. Bullets flew through the smoke and dust. Virgil managed to kill one of the brothers and the corrupt sheriff, while Everett killed the other brother. Bragg escaped on horseback, disappearing into the horizon. When things calmed down, Virgil and Everett were wounded, but alive. Allie ran to Virgil's side, afraid he would die in her arms. Time passed and life slowly began to rebuild itself. The house Virgil once promised Allie was completed. His leg never fully healed, leaving him with a permanent limp and a brace that made a faint sound when he walked. Yet, despite the pain of the past, a sense of peace began to return. Allie's betrayal was not forgotten, but forgiveness lingered between them. That's what I was trying to say. On one evening, Everett asked the woman he was seeing if she thought Allie truly loved Virgil. She smiled faintly and told him only men waste their time worrying about love. In her view, Allie stayed with Virgil because he now held an official title. She said, if someone better comes along, Allie wouldn't hesitate to replace him. Everett didn't argue. He simply stayed silent, realizing her words might be truer than he wanted to believe. Shortly after their encounter at the cattle barns, Virgil and Everett received shocking news that Randall Bragg had received a presidential pardon. This was something Bragg had always boasted about, though many dismissed his words as desperate lies. Now, it turned out, he had been telling the truth. Yawkey County with President Chester A. Arthur. Soon after, Bragg returned to Appaloosa, dressed in fine clothes, presenting himself as a reborn man. He wore confidence like armor, greeting the townspeople with polite smiles, as if the past could be forgotten. That evening, he entered the saloon where Virgil, Everett, and Allie were having dinner. You stand here now while I'm trying to have dinner with my friends, pretending you didn't do it. Bragg approached their table and tried to make peace. Virgil spoke quietly and pretended to be a different man, meeting his gaze and refusing. He told Bragg that no pardon would erase what he had done, and that he was still a killer and would never escape justice. Bragg's expression tightened, but he said nothing and left. After he left, Allie asked Virgil why Bragg had returned to town. Virgil replied that pride was the only reason. Pride. Virgil went to see the judge who had presided over Bragg's case. The judge told him there was nothing to be done. The pardon had already been granted after an unfair trial and a lack of conclusive evidence. When Virgil returned, he told Everett what he had learned. Everett listened and said he had never cared much for the law as a gunman, and if justice failed, he would take matters into his own hands. Virgil told him that the law was the only thing that gave his authority meaning, and without it, his badge was worthless. In the days that followed, Bragg opened a luxurious hotel. He talked a lot about reform and respect, though most people in town believed his money still came from the same shady dealings. Everett visited him one afternoon. Bragg greeted him warmly, offered him a drink, and spoke about a new beginning. He claimed to have left his old ways behind and even suggested working with Everett and Virgil. When Everett remained silent, Bragg told him that if they refused to stand by his side, they might soon find themselves out of a job. By then, it was clear that the town leaders had fallen under Bragg's influence. Everett realized Virgil's time as marshal was coming to an end. That evening, Everett and Virgil spoke quietly about what was happening. Everett admitted that there was no longer a place for him in Appaloosa, while Virgil confessed that he wanted to stay because of Allie. Everett expressed his concern that Allie might leave when things changed. Virgil said he already knew that, but still wanted to stay with her. Not long after, Everett saw Allie at the Bragg Hotel, sitting at the piano and playing quietly while Bragg watched her. Later that day, he saw her sneaking into Bragg's upstairs room. He didn't feel anger, only a quiet disappointment. The balance of power in Appaloosa had shifted, and Allie had changed with it. When she came down the hallway, she found Everett waiting for her. Their eyes met briefly, but she passed him without saying a word. The next day, Everett visited the local prostitute he had been seeing. He brought her a small necklace, a simple gift as a farewell. As they sat together, he confessed something that had weighed on his conscience for a long time. Years ago, he had killed an outlaw, not in the line of duty or self-defense, but out of anger, and the memory had haunted him ever since. He told her he was leaving town and didn't know if he would ever return. Before leaving, Everett stopped by the hotel. He placed his badge and gun on the bar counter and told the bartender they were for Bragg. Then he went to find the man himself. When he found Bragg, Everett struck him in the face and challenged him to a fair fight. Bragg froze, uncertain and humiliated. Everett hit him again, this time harder, leaving him no room to back down. He told Bragg that if he refused to face him now, Everett would come back and kill him anyway. Bragg grew angry, grabbed his gun, and rushed outside to accept the challenge. Do you think you can beat me without your friend Cole to back you up? Virgil arrived at the scene and saw Everett standing in the street, ready for a duel. He stepped forward, trying to stop him, but Everett looked at him calmly and asked him to step aside. He told Virgil that he had never asked him for anything before and that he was asking this favor now. Understanding his friend's decision, Virgil stepped back without another word. The showdown ended almost as soon as it began. Bragg tried to reach for his gun, but Everett was faster. One shot rang out, and Bragg fell dead in the dust. Everett calmly reloaded his gun and, without looking back, mounted his horse. As he left Appaloosa, Everett thought about what he had done. By killing Bragg, he had freed Virgil from a fight that could have cost him his badge and possibly his life. He gave his friend a chance to continue his work as a lawman and left room for Virgil and Allie to reconcile with each other. The town disappeared behind him as he rode toward the horizon, searching once again for a purpose and a place he might finally belong. He headed straight into the sunset, riding west at an easy pace.